This video is sponsored by InVideo AI. This is the FIM-92 Stinger missile, and since the 1980s, it's been a major nightmare for air forces across the world, and also for FedEx. That's because Stinger is man-portable, relatively inexpensive, easy to operate, and fairly effective, which makes it perfect for militaries, and also for terrorist groups. There is just one problem: no one remembers how to make it. But why Stingers have a battery that only lasts a few seconds, how this metal basket prevents you from shooting at your friends, and how this decades-old missile can still reach over twice the speed of sound is not what you think. The Stinger is a fire-and-forget missile, which may sound perfect for people with dementia, but it just means that once the round leaves the tube, the shooter's work is done, which is a huge advantage. This makes the Stinger perfect for low-altitude anti-air rapid response missions. Within seconds, you could be on the site, and then all you need to do is grab the launcher and deal with the threat.
Get out of there! What are you doing?
Just make sure to jump back into the car quickly. But Stinger's designers had to solve one huge problem. See, the rocket exhaust from the missile launch was like my ex-girlfriend, incredibly hot but quite dangerous. To get around this issue, Stingers were designed with a dual motor design. The first is called the launch motor, and it provides a small boost to shoot the missile out of the actual tube, and then it detaches. Once the missile is far enough away from the shooter, the second motor, called the flight motor, ignites and speeds the missile up to Mach 2.2, all the way to the target. But what's that grenade-looking thing that the gunner pulls out of the Stinger and throws away? The Stinger has two major parts. The first part is the missile assembly, which contains the launch tube, the missile, and the automatic guidance system. The second is the gripstock assembly, which connects to the bottom of the tube and contains the trigger. Once the missile is fired, the gripstock can be detached and reused. The automatic guidance uses an infrared tracker that locks onto the heat signature of an airplane or helicopter. But if the sensor itself gets hot, it would add unwanted noise to the signal. This is where the grenade-looking thing comes in handy. This is called a BCU, or battery coolant unit. When activated, the BCU shoots out compressed argon gas to the seeker unit in order to cool it down. The cooling increases the thermal resolution of the weapon system, which in turn means it can detect aircraft at farther ranges. This allows the Stinger to engage targets at a maximum range of 5 miles and at an altitude of up to 11,500 feet. But the BCU has a dual purpose. It also powers up the missile by providing electrical power to the entire system using an old-school thermal battery. Everyone loves retro technology, but maybe not when it means the battery only lasts about 45 seconds before it dies, and they'll have to get a new battery because the coolant will run out. This is why Stinger teams have less than a minute to identify a target, prep the launcher, and get a lock before firing, which is about the same time that it takes to make a video, thanks to InVideo AI. It's this easy. I want a 3-minute video about the pros and cons of joining the military. Use a female British voice and small yellow subtitles. Using my text prompt, InVideo AI will create an engaging script, source high-quality and relevant footage, and realistic-sounding voiceovers. Within minutes, you can review the first draft of the video.
There's a deep sense of pride and honor that...
To make any changes, simply ask what you want. Translate to French.
Bonjour.
You can also manually change the shot if you're looking for something more specific. Another great feature is that you can clone your own voice and use it in the videos. This is actually not my voice, but my AI-generated voice. You can try InVideo AI for yourself completely free. And to create videos without a watermark or use the voice cloning feature, you can opt in for as low as $20 per month. This is a fraction of the cost of otherwise subscribing to video editing tools and purchasing stock footage. So just click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen and use the code NWIT50 to get 2 times the number of video generation credits in your first month. To confuse heat-seeking missiles, aircraft could deploy countermeasures, like flares. To an infrared sensor, the heat from flares could look just like the heat from an aircraft engine. This is why, in its later iterations, the Stinger was also equipped with a UV tracker. This helps the missile tell the difference between the actual aircraft and any flares that might have been shot out. Once the missile is fired, the gunner or assistant gunner quickly removes the BCU from the launcher. This is because the thermal battery produces a good amount of heat, and if it remains plugged in with no missile, it could overheat and damage the entire launcher or cause burns to the Stinger team. In case you're wondering what all these missiles are being shot at, it's drones. These little airplanes provide a realistic training scenario and are fairly cost-effective. Once launched, drones need to be flown far away from their launch site for safety reasons, so that they don't pose any danger upon being hit to those standing on the ground. This demands the need for binoculars for the drone pilots. Of course, not 100% of the targets are hit. Stingers could sometimes suffer from projectile dysfunction. During the Soviet-Afghan War in the 1980s, Stingers had a success rate of 79%. That said, Raytheon claims the success rate of the latest missiles to be over 90%. Here's a question. If the Stinger is fired toward the target, then how come the missile makes a sharp turn instead of going straight at it? That's because anti-air missiles don't chase the target they're trying to hit. Instead, they try to predict where the aircraft will be to successfully intercept it. This is called proportional navigation, and it makes it a lot more difficult for a pilot to try to run away from an incoming round. With that said, Stingers don't actually have to hit their target in order to take it down. That's because they contain a high explosive fragmentation warhead, like a hand grenade, connected to a proximity fuse. If the missile doesn't directly impact, it will still hit the aircraft with a bubble of shrapnel. If the missile doesn't hit a target within 17 seconds, it will self-destruct. Even though Stingers theoretically can be operated by a single operator, they're usually used in buddy teams. One person serves as the gunner, in charge of actually locking onto the target and firing the missile. The other person serves as the assistant gunner. Their job is to help identify targets, carry extra ammo, and cover the gunner while they're trying to get a lock on. They usually have a hand over the gunner's shoulder and stay pretty close to them to help in aiming at the target. But just knowing how to aim and shoot is not enough. How can the gunner be sure they're shooting at an enemy airplane and not a friendly one? This is an IFF antenna, or identification friend or foe. These use too much power for the BCU to handle, so a separate battery pack is attached and worn on the gunner's hip. The antenna shoots out what's called an interrogation signal, which pings the aircraft. If the aircraft is using NATO standard IFF tags, then the launcher will receive a no-shoot signal. If the signal back is confirmed enemy or no signal is returned at all, then the gunner begins targeting the aircraft. Locking onto an aircraft only takes about 3 to 5 seconds, after which the shooter is given an audio and visual tone indicating a good lock. But trying to listen for a tone can be hard to do when gunfire and explosions are going off around you. To help with this, a small bone conductor sits on the gunner's cheek, which vibrates against his skull and gives haptic feedback once a good lock is made. Yep, the same technology that tells you someone swiped right on your Tinder profile. You may have noticed that the gunner always points up just before pulling the trigger. There's a good reason for this. If the missile is fired while the launcher is being held relatively parallel with the horizon, the boost motor will simply slam the Stinger into the ground. To solve this issue, once the missile has a lock on the target, the uncage button on the front of the launcher is engaged. This allows the seeker inside the missile to independently track the aircraft, so that the shooter can super elevate, which means he raises the launcher above the actual target. Finally, the trigger is pulled. The missile shoots out, and the Stinger team gets to brag that they got to shoot a missile launcher and their friends didn't.
Does anybody else need to shoot?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
That said, with a price tag of $150,000, Stingers are not exactly cheap. This is why the military has a Stinger dome. which is basically a massive projection screen with a mock Stinger launcher as the controller. But these simulation rooms are expensive and need specially designed facilities, so mobile virtual reality versions of the simulator are becoming more common. But by far, the closest thing to firing a live round is the Stinger Training Launch Simulator. This recreates the entire experience of putting a Stinger into operation, including loading, locking onto an actual aircraft, and firing. But instead of a missile, the trainer fires an aluminum weight, which quickly hits the ground. This simulates the weight shift in the launcher after the round is fired. I should note that not all Stingers are shoulder-fired. Avenger variants of the American Humvee mount 8 Stinger missiles at once. Stryker APCs with the Sergeant Stout modification carry a launcher with 4, and certain models of Apache and Viper helicopters can be equipped with air-to-air versions of the system. These are ideal for larger formations that need to rapidly move and don't have the time to send out teams on foot to engage aerial targets. But if the Stinger missile is so useful and widespread, why did the United States stop making them? Stingers are a product of the Cold War, but after 2 decades of fighting groups that didn't have air forces, the United States had no need to keep producing mass quantities of these missiles. But now in Ukraine, with both sides fighting for control of the skies, thousands of Stingers have been sent to the front lines. With the American stockpiles low, in May 2022, the Army placed an order for an additional 1,700 units. The problem was that Raytheon, the manufacturer, had essentially forgotten how to make them. It had been so long since anyone had ordered them that the company had to bring back retired engineers who were already in their 70s to show the employees how to exactly build them. Some of the electrical components were so old that they're no longer produced, so it was cheaper to just redesign them completely. For now, Raytheon reports the full order of missiles won't be ready until 2026, which maybe is not entirely a bad thing, because these weapons could get in the wrong hands. In a terrorist attack in 2003, an Airbus DHL Express cargo plane took a hit from a shoulder-fired missile, possibly a Stinger, shortly after taking off from Baghdad in Iraq. Because of incidents like this, FedEx spent more than 12 months testing a laser-based anti-missile system on some of their cargo planes. It's a fascinating story, and you can watch it right here.